Who's here?
Hard to tell.
Catherine Scherzer, Vega. Okay.
Okay. Thank you all for joining. We're just about ready to start. We are thinking about the third lesson, but each lesson is sort of standalone. So you don't have to be here for the previous lessons. And what we want to talk about today is an important concept in the Kabbalah. It appears very often in the Kabbalah. And we're going to try to explain a little bit, first of all, what the function of it is. In other words, what the Kabbalah says about it. And then, most importantly, what does it mean within us, within the human soul? Because a very important premise of Kabbalah is that it's based on a verse of Job that says, "Mipsari echzeloka," from my flesh I could know God. In other words, if you look at yourself, the human soul reflects Hashem, reflects God, because it says that God creates us in the image of God. So if we're created in the image of God, then when we see certain phenomenon within ourselves, we can deduce that God creates that phenomenon within himself as well, as we will explain. And so we want to think about the Kabbalistic concept. We want to think about how it applies within our life, within our soul. And then most importantly, we want to think about it in the context of how to make it practical. How could it help us in our daily life? And in particular, we're going to think about it, how could it help us within relationships with other people? So if we understand the Kabbalistic model, then we'll be able to figure out, first of all, understand ourselves, and also understand how to interact with others. And of course, I'm talking about the concept of what the Kabbalah calls the four worlds. Arba olamot, there are four worlds. And according to the Kabbalah, it's not that God creates, you have God and then you have the physical universe. Physical universe is only the final stage of a whole chain of worlds. And to get from God to our physical universe, there has to be a evolution, or maybe a way to say it is the opposite of evolution. In other words, we devolve. And every level, every world conceals the divine light more and more until you get to our world. So according to the Kabbalah, there are four steps in this process. There are four worlds. A world means a state of being, a state of consciousness. And so we want to talk about those four worlds. And like I said, we want to talk about how we have those four worlds within our own soul, and how it reflects within the Kabbalistic interpretation of certain Jewish practices and customs and prayers. And ultimately, we're going to think about, okay, so how does that help us in our life when we have to relate with the people around us? Because if you think about it, those four worlds were created for God to interact with us, to make space for us. So then when we can also use that four-world model to how we interact with the people around us. So this is all by way of introduction. We're just about ready to begin the journey. As always, if you have any questions or comments, please don't be shy and jump in. Okay, so the first point we're going to say is as follows. Let's start with the names of the four worlds. Not that the names are important. You don't have to memorize them. There's not going to be a test. But just to understand conceptually what is happening here. So the names of the four worlds is the highest world, closest to God, is called the world of Atzilut. In English, it's called the world of emanation. God emanates from himself. That's the highest world. Then you have sort of a gap, because after emanation, after Atzilut, after the highest world, you come to the second world, which we call creation, Bria, creation. All of a sudden, creation is something new. It's different than emanation, as we're going to explain. After creation, we have Yetzira, which means formation. You're forming that which already has been created. And finally, you have the final world, which is called in the Kabbalah the world of action. And the world of action also includes this tangible physical world that we call our universe, where we reside and we hang out and we spend time. So what does this mean? What does this mean? So emanation, the highest world, means that there's no world yet. If you think about it, it's before creation. There's no creation. What do I mean there's no creation, right? Creation is world number 2. So what do you have before creation? So here is what we discussed this 2 weeks ago. The Kabbalah has the notion of 10 sfirot, that God is infinite, but to get from infinity to our world wouldn't work. So God creates 10 limited expressions of himself, which we call the 10 sfirot. He expresses himself in 10 ways. That's kindness, that's severity, that's compassion, etc., etc. We have 10 sfirot. So the first world is God expressing himself in finite ways. In other words, he's expressing himself in specific ways. God's kindness. Before that world, there's no kindness, because kindness is a definition, and God is infinite. So before you get to the first world, all you have is infinity. Once you get to the first world, you have God's kindness, God's wisdom, God's understanding. And that's why we say it's not creation yet, but it's a world in the sense because it's no longer infinity. There's already a description, there's already a definition. God is expressing himself in a certain way. And that's so in the Kabbalistic literature, Atzilut, the highest world, is still considered godly. Meaning to say, it's God expressing himself in certain ways. Like I said, God's kindness, God's wisdom, etc. Before that world, there's nothing that you can speak of, because you have infinity. And you can't describe infinity. Why? Because every description means a definition, right? Try to describe me. Try to describe the universe. You say it's tremendous. It's a 10 billion light years long. Okay, that's a definition. If God's infinite, there's no definition. So the first world is where you have 10 sfirot. God expresses himself in 10 limited ways. But you still do not have a creation. You still do not have a consciousness that feels separate and apart from God. Then you get to the second world, which is called, a question. Good. Go ahead, Fega.
I have a question. Was there an intention before creating Atzilut, was there intention to create a world? That's the first question. And then when the letters were created?
So the answer is yes. The whole purpose of creating all the worlds is to get to the goal, which is our reality, right? But before you can have our reality, it has to go through a chain. And I'm going to give the example within ourselves also. Once we discuss within ourselves, you'll see how it applies. So for example, let's say you decide let's say I find you in where do I find you? I find you taking a walk in Todd's Point, okay? That's the world of action. You're in Todd's Point. You didn't start at Todd's Point. You started within yourself and you had an idea. Before that, forget an idea, you had a desire. Desire means I want to go somewhere. And then that desire took hold and you had an idea, thought, words in your mind. And said, you know what, maybe let's do specific. Instead of being general, I want to go somewhere, I want to go to Todd's Point. And then you have to actually go and do it. So within yourself, as we will show, within yourself, you don't just end up in it with an action. The action is the final chain, but the action is preceded by many steps. Now, the many steps are here to motivate the action. So the same thing, yes, God wants to create a world, but it doesn't start with the physical world. It starts with the world of Atzilut, which means within myself, I have a certain desire. Then to create it, I have to create an other, right? So God wants a relationship with us. So he has to create an other, as we're going to discuss. In world number 2, you get to the other. But before God creates the other, God within himself has to want to create the other. That's within himself. There's nobody else yet. So all I'm trying to say is, yes, all these steps, these 4 steps are necessary to get to the action. And they are, and the goal, of course, is the action. Because when you're sitting in your house thinking about Todd's point, that's a wonderful experience. But the goal is to actually go and experience Todd's point, right? So that all the steps are really here to get to the action. But that's a separate Hasidic point. You don't get that in the Kabbalah. In the Kabbalah, it seems that the whole point is to climb to the highest world. Chassidus flips everything and says, no, the whole point is to get to the action. But that's already details. Before we're already getting too detailed. All I'm trying to say is that, yes, when God creates the world, the purpose of the first world is to create, ultimately it trickles down to create all the other worlds. Okay, so after you have the first world, you have Bria, creation. What's creation? There's something outside of myself. God creates something outside of myself. It's a creation, it's not God. There's its own consciousness. So that's creation. The problem is in the world of creation understands that it was formed by God. So it's very conscious of God, less conscious of itself. So it's a creation. Imagine I was created by God, but if I were like the angels who were very cognizant of that notion, then the presence of God is always on top of their mind. They're not really thinking about what they want, they're thinking about what God wants. They're a creation. Then you get to the step of formation. Formation is where the creation already takes hold, it takes a form. It's becoming more physical. In other words, it's becoming more self-focused and more self-centered. And in the world, if I live in the world of formation, then I'm starting to think about, okay, I may be a creation, and God may have created me, but what do I want? How do I feel? And my ego, my perspective takes center stage. And finally, we come to the world of action. The world of action, like we say, just very physical. And the world of action, I could be living in the world of action, and I'm not even cognizant that I am a creation. So the whole notion of godliness takes a lot of work to achieve within the world of action. But you can't start with the world of action. To create, God has the infinite light. How do you get from the infinite light to the physical universe? Well, first God creates you have the highest world. And the highest world is what we call emanation. Emanation is all you have is the feeling of godliness. Then you have the next world, which is all of a sudden is a creation. There's a consciousness that feels separate and apart. Then that consciousness becomes more crystallized and becomes more tangible. And now that consciousness says, tell me how I feel. I want to know about myself. And finally, you get to the lowest world, the world of action. In the world of action, you don't even think about God. You don't think about your source unless you really put in the effort. And that is the world we live in. And these are the 4 worlds. And a lot of the Kabbalah is that a lot of the things we do within Judaism is to try to raise our consciousness to climb to the higher worlds. And I'm going to show you a few examples of where that plays out in Kabbalistic literature, in Jewish life as we know it. And then after a minute or two, we'll do after a detail or two, then we'll go to think about what does this mean within our life? And ultimately the next step, if we have time, what does this mean within our relationships? So I said too many terms, I said 4 terms. Don't get scared away. As we progress, hopefully we'll understand it better. And again, the names are not important, but the concepts are important, and hopefully we'll be able to understand. So this is the story in short, the introduction. Now I'm just going to show you a few little points that 2 points, one in the prayer and one in Shabbat, maybe. And we're going to try to show how the Kabbalah talks about this notion of the 4 worlds. And then, like I said, we'll move on to explain how it applies in our soul and in our relationships. So that's the plan. That's the roadmap. That's introduction number 1. So we're just starting our journey. Whatever we don't clarify this year, come back next summer in good health, and we'll continue. Okay, I don't have it on the screen, but I have a prayer book. I'm going to show it to Joan. This is a prayer we say every morning. I'm going to read it. I'm going to read it together with you, so everybody else can hear. This is a
one?
Yeah, Elohim, my God. So
Okay.
let's do this slowly, and I'm going to show you how we do this. And I'm just going to show you, this is an ancient prayer that goes back to the Talmud. It goes like this. So it's about almost 2,000 years old, at least, if not more. So this is, everyone knows the Modani prayer. Wake up in the morning, you thank God. The Modani prayer is short. Then on the same page in the prayer book, there's an elaboration of that prayer. Same idea. We offer thanks to God for giving us our soul, but it's an elaboration. Instead of being 2 lines, it's actually 6 lines. Okay, here it goes. 6, it's probably more than 6 lines. Here we go. So here we go. My God, Elohai, the soul which you have given within me is pure, right? So it's pure. I'm going to count. I'm going to give you the hint. That's the highest world, pure. You have created it, the world of Bria, the second world. You have formed it. Formation is the third world. You have breathed it into me. Breathed it into me. When the soul comes into the body, that's the third, that's the fourth world. That's the world of action. That's the blessing at Talmudic times. Remember, in the days of the Talmud, the Kabbalistic information was hidden. It was supposed to be concealed. But still, they alluded to it. They put hints throughout Jewish practice and throughout the prayers. And this is one of those prayers. God, the soul that you gave me is pure. You created it. That's the second world. You formed it. And then you blew it into my nostrils. That is the third one. Okay. What is interesting about this prayer? So there's a fascinating Kabbalistic idea that says as follows. This prayer logically makes no sense. Why? The soul you have given within me is pure. You have created it. How could you speak about a soul before it was created? It should have said, the soul that you created is pure. You see the problem? How could you talk about the soul before it was created? The answer is because the soul existed before it was created. What does that mean? Makes no sense. The soul existed before it was created. What happened? Is the rabbi asleep? Did he drink too much in the morning? Did he not drink enough coffee? Did he drink too much l'chaim? Am I confused? No, I'm not confused. The soul existed before it created. Because when the soul was in the highest world, it was not yet a creation. It was pure. What does pure mean? It was part of God. So the soul so let's reread the prayer. The soul which you have given within me is pure. My soul, all our souls originated in the highest world. In the highest world, we're in the world of Atzilut. We're in the world of emanation. All there is the awareness of God. The soul is just a spark of God. Then we go to the next world. You have created it. Then the soul gets a consciousness. Now it feels like it's its own entity. And then it's formed. The entity becomes important to it. Now I'm curious about how I feel about myself. And finally, it comes into the world of action. You breathe it into my life. But what's interesting here is that this prayer tracks those 4 steps of the 4 worlds, and something could exist before it was created, because when it exists in the highest world, it's not a creation, it's part of God. So that's just an interesting detail, that on the very first page of the prayer book, the notion of the 4 worlds is hinted to. So that's one idea, and I want to take 2 more, maybe 2-3 more minutes to talk about one more idea in Jewish practice, especially according to the Kabbalistic interpretation, where the idea of the 4 worlds plays out in a very important way. And also, there's a prayer from the Zohar that we say in our prayer book. At least the Sfardim say it, and the Hasidim say it, and it's connected to that notion of the 4 worlds. And after that, I'll try to be no more. Not to be too spiritual and lofty, but try to bring it down within our world. What does that mean within myself? And what does it mean within human relationships? Okay, so far so good. I assume that nobody has any questions. If you do, please speak up, because my father used to say, I have prophecy, but I don't want to use it. I don't want to waste it on this. Go ahead. Okay, here we go. What's the next notion? Where does the Kabbalah make a big deal about the 4 worlds, the 3 worlds, the four worlds? So I'm going to just say the quick point, and then I'm going to show you a prayer that reflects this point. Okay. So according to the Kabbalah, a big deal is Shabbos. If you look at the Hasidic literature all around, even more in other Hasidic groups, more than Chabad, but Chabad also, but in other Hasidic groups, it is sort of the main point is Shabbat, right? If you think about it, Jews in Eastern Europe, when the Hasidic movement began, Jews suffered a lot, and they had very difficult lives, both physically and spiritually, because they didn't have the means to understand, to spend time studying Torah in peace and tranquility. and sometimes they didn't have the means to educate their children, so not everybody was knowledgeable, and in general, life was difficult. And the Hasidic movement comes and places great emphasis on Shabbat because Shabbat is the time of spirituality. Shabbat is the time that no matter how bad your physical circumstances are, you can get pleasure if you tap in to the energy and the mysticism and the spirit of Shabbat. And that's why in the Hasidic movement, Shabbat became a very, very important theme. And I think less so in Chabad, not because we do have less of Shabbat, because Chabad has other themes as well. But let's think about Shabbat from the perspective of the Kabbalah and the Hasidic movement. And in short, if you want to know what Shabbat is in Kabbalistic literature, Shabbat also means return. The Gemara already makes the point that the letter Shabbat could be rest, but it's the same letters as Tashev, like Teshuvah, return. Same letters. Shabbat is Shin, Bet, Taf. Shabbat. If you scramble those letters, you get Tashev, Taf, Shin, Bet. Same letters. So Shabbat and Tashev, Shabbat and return. So what does the Kabbalah say? The Kabbalah says, look, what happens on Shabbat? I'll tell you. In the 6 days of creation, the energy of the world of emanation, Atzilut, the highest world, especially Malchut, but I don't want to get too specific, the energy of the highest worlds descends and gives life to the 3 lower worlds. And if you happen to be living in the 3 lower worlds like we are, you're stuck in the lower worlds. You're stuck in the consciousness of the lower worlds. So if you're in the world of action like we are, it's very hard to be spiritual. It's possible, but it's very difficult because we're stuck in the lower world. What happens on Shabbat? You know what happens? It's what the Kabbalah calls Aliyat Olamot, the elevation of the worlds. Here, the 3 lower worlds go up. They return, they go to their source, and they connect with the highest world. Now, you may not realize it because the world outside looks the same. Greenwich Avenue looks the same, and the tree outside your house looks the same. But the energy of the world, if you could tap into the energy of the world, says the Kabbalah, you are no longer living in the world of, you're living in the world of action, but the world of action had an elevation and was upgraded. And when it was upgraded, it now is united with the highest world. And therefore on Shabbat, if you tune into Shabbat, you can feel much more spiritual. And you could feel the oneness, you could feel the presence of God that is available in the world of Atzilut. You can feel it on Shabbat as well. And I'm going to read you one little prayer from the Zohar, which sounds very mystical, but once I explained it, hopefully it won't sound so mystical. And I'm going to show you that. That's going to be interesting. And by the way, we could sit here all day because the prayer itself, the daily prayer itself, has 4 sections. And according to the Kabbalah, what we're trying to do is rise in the consciousness of the 4 worlds. And eventually we get to Amida, which is the highest world, but it's too much for one day. Let me just read the mystical prayer of Shabbat, which Rabbi Darren, when he introduces this prayer, he has an introduction. He basically says something like, if you don't understand it, that means you're reading it right, because it's very mystical. However, now you have the proper Kabbalistic training, now you will understand it. Why? Because you understand what the Zohar is talking about. The Zohar is saying in simple English, the lower worlds go up to the higher world, and now they too feel that oneness of God that is available in the highest world. Now, I'm not saying you're going to feel this naturally, but on Shabbat, if you meditate, if you pray, if you celebrate, if you tune into this, you are able to reach and feel a sense of that oneness. How to do it, come back later. We'll do another class on how to do that. But just to say, this class is about which energy is available on Shabbat. Okay.
What did you say it's called? The going up?
Aliyat Olamot. Aliyat Olamot means the ascending of the worlds. The ascending, the worlds go up. And it means we're still a world. We still have the world of action. But the world of action, the energy of the world of action elevates itself and is united with the world of emanation, with the world of Atzilut. And therefore, that oneness that is available, that consciousness of oneness that is available in Atzilut will be available in this world as well if you could tap into it. So again, 2 more minutes, and then I'll try no more theoretical. We make it very practical. So that's the way the Kabbalah is. When you start, it seems very abstract, but if you hang around, if you stick around for long enough, you'll see that this is very, very powerful and very deep and very relevant to our soul, to our life, and of course to our relationships as well. So I'm reading, like I said, Friday night after L'cha Dodi, which was also, by the way, instituted by the Kabbalists in Tzfat, but that's another story. That's not for right now. it's unbelievable how this one Kabbalistic prayer was literally accepted throughout every single Jewish community. It's
Alphabets.
Shlema Alphabets, yes, and it's fascinating because there is no prayer that's 500 years old that is universally said. No such thing except for this one. So it's very powerful, very fascinating. After that, we, as in the Sephardic Jews or the Hasidim, which follow the Sephardic Jews, have a strange prayer called Kegavna. Kegavna means it's Aramaic, just like. It's a prayer in Aramaic, and it's a prayer that comes from the Zohar. And the Zohar describes Shabbat. Now, I'm going to read it. Not everything I understand, but some things are going to make sense, some things are not. But I'm just I'm setting it up. Basically, what it's saying, when it says oneness, it means the oneness, the feeling that is felt in the world of Atzilut, where you don't feel creation, you just feel the oneness of God. Here we go. The journey begins. I'm just going to read the first half. It's on page 160, if you'd like.
Yes. Find it.
See, it's good you came in person because you get the prayer book. I'm
Okay.
sorry. Okay.
60.
160, yes. This is 160. Kigavna, here, Kigavna.
I got it.
Just as they, the six Sfirot, Chesed, kindness, Yisod, nation, unite above into the oneness, so she, Malchut, kingship, unites below into the mystery of oneness. So this is a little bit more specific. The energy of the highest world that descends to create the lowest world is called Malchut, kingship. We're not going to get into that. But just like the other parts of Atzilut, of the highest world, the emanation, feel the oneness, Malchut on Shabbat also feels the oneness. It's introduced into the mystery of oneness so as to be with them above, unity, paralleling unity. In other words, just like the oneness is felt in the higher world, it's also felt in the lower worlds. The Holy One, blessed be He, who is one above, does not take his seat upon his throne of glory until she enters into the mystery of oneness. Similar to his, to be oneness corresponding to oneness. This is, as we have stated, is the esoteric meaning of the words. The Lord is one and his name is one. What is it? What is the Zohar saying except for repeating the word oneness so many times? This is very powerful. The Lord, the one above, meaning God, does not take his seat upon his throne of glory, meaning God does not start celebrating Shabbat in the higher world until she, meaning Malchut, the energy from the highest world that descended into the lower worlds, until she is elevated and enters into the mystery of oneness, similar to his. Meaning that the energy of the lower worlds feel the oneness, just like God himself feels the oneness.
Why she?
Because Malchut is feminine. Because Malchut is the mother of the lower worlds. So she gives birth to the lower worlds. So Malchut is within the Sfirot, some Sfirot are masculine, some Sfirot are feminine. The creative energy of God that descends from Atzilut to the lowest world is referred to as Shekhinah, which is also feminine, has a hey at the end, and that's why she. And it continues. I don't have time to read. Basically talks about how the world becomes more spiritual. Enough for right now. All I'm trying to say is they got the notion of the four worlds, and I showed you two places in the prayer book where the notion of the four worlds is expressed. One is in the prayer of the expanded Modani, describing the soul, how the soul began as pure in the highest world. It wasn't created yet. It's pure. It's part of God. And then it descends to creation, formation, action. And then we get to the idea of Shabbat, where the energy of the lower world ascends, and we have the ability to tap into the oneness that is felt in the highest world. This is the four worlds from the perspective of mysticism. Now we want to see how it reflects in our human soul, and ultimately, like I said, hopefully, if we have time, how we relate to other people. Okay, so the name, just to clarify, the name of the three lower worlds in English is creation, formation, and action. Just to clarify again, the creation, formation, and action. And formation is where you have an idea, and the idea is still abstract. Once it's formed, it's less abstract. If it's less abstract, it's less spiritual. Because less abstract, formation, The more form you have, the more limitation you have. The more limitation you have, the more physical you are. Do you see what I'm saying? You have an abstract idea, right? Take let's say abstract art. 5 people see abstract art. They all interpret it in 5 different ways. Why? It's still more spiritual. If it's more spiritual, it's more infinite. If it's more infinite, it can have all different expressions. Once the art is formed, now it means more specific. If it's more specific, it's more defined. If it's more defined, it's more physical, because the definition of spirituality, as we will see, is transcendence. But we'll get to that in a minute. So far, again, the names is emanation, where God emanates of himself. There's no creation, it's just him expressing himself. Then you have creation, which is just the notion that there is another consciousness, but it's not yet defined. Formation is when that consciousness is actually formed, and now it's focused on self, focused on how it feels, etc. And then action is the world we live in, where it's very tangible. It's a tangible universe, and sometimes we look at the tangible and we don't even sense that there's something behind it, that there's a creator, that there's an energy that creates it, because we just see it. It looks just physical, and really it's obscuring the multiple levels of spirituality that is beneath it. Okay, now we're going to go to this notion of the 4 worlds within the human soul, but we're going to start not from the top, we'll start from the bottom. Start from the bottom. And in the bottom within the human soul, it's the lowest level is the easiest. The lowest world is the world of action. Within the human being is action. I do something. It's an action. It's the most physical. Why do I say it's physical? Because an action does not necessarily have spirituality within it. It could not, but it doesn't necessarily have spirituality within it. For example, let's say what's an example? I want to show my love to you. So I go to the store, I buy a bouquet of flowers, and I give you the bouquet of flowers. Okay? So this action has a feeling within it, right? Because I'm not just giving you something, I also have a feeling. I will see later, a feeling is more spiritual. Okay, yeah, there is a feeling involved, but if somebody doesn't understand feelings, imagine I'm in a world, a person, I don't have any feelings. I don't have any feelings. I'm just looking at the action. The action is just a physical action. There may be a feeling hidden, but it's hidden. Let me show it to you another way. I can give you a bouquet of flowers and not love you. But what does that mean? I can do the action without the feeling, right? So the human being has within himself or herself the ability to take action. That action is wonderful. It's just not the most spiritual part of self. It's the lowest.
That action could make another person feel better.
Correct.
The other person.
Correct.
And maybe raise them to a
Correct.
spiritual level.
Correct. So like even in this world, we're on the world of action, but the purpose of the world of action is to see beneath it and see the layers of spirituality, right? All I'm trying to say is there's a dimension within self. I'm doing something. I don't really necessarily feel, but I could still have the ability to do. I could do something without feeling that. That's the most physical part of self. The lowest part of self is the ability to do, the ability to take action. Yes, that action may have, sometimes it may be embedded with spirituality, but with the lowest part of self is the ability to do. And that's the lowest world. Then we get to the second world. What's one step above? We're going to call it the world of formation. But again, we're starting from the bottom just to make it easier. We're starting from the bottom to make it easier. What's above action? Above action is emotion. Why do I say emotion? Emotion is more spiritual. Why? We're going to define spiritual. Okay. Emotion is more spiritual because let's define spirituality for 1 second. Spirituality is transcendence. The more something is locked up in self, the more physical it is. The more it could spread and expand beyond self, the more spiritual it is. So what's more spiritual, a stone or a tree? The tree. Why? Because it's not locked in self. It can expand, it can grow, it can give shade. What's more spiritual, a stone, a tree, or an animal? An animal is more spiritual. Why? An animal could roam. An animal's not locked up into one place. The tree is locked in one place. The tree, the stone can't even move. The tree at least can move, but it's stuck in one place. The animal could roam. It's not locked in one physical space. It's more spiritual. Plus it has emotion. We'll get to that in a minute. So what I'm trying to say is the more you're locked in one definition, the more physical you are. The more you could transcend yourself and relate to things outside of yourself, the more spiritual you are. What is an emotion? Emotion is how I relate to the world outside of me. It's no longer me. I'm drinking, I'm taking, action could be about self, but emotion is I'm reacting to something outside of me. So in the world of emotion, there is something outside of me that's a little bit more spiritual. Go ahead.
I think that's just intellect.
Hang on.
Not,
Let me say the third one, and then you'll see the second and third and see how they play out.
okay.
Very, very good point. Hang on. Above emotion is intellect. Intellect is even more spiritual. Why? I'm sorry for jumping ahead of Seth. Why? Because intellect means, you know what intellect means? Intellect means I'm objective. But even before I'm objective, let's get to the point. I could be sitting here and thinking about Japan. What does that mean? I can go beyond myself. I could understand things that I don't agree with. For example, I can understand that broccoli is tasty. Emotionally, I don't like broccoli, assuming I don't. I do, but emotionally, let's say I don't like broccoli, okay? So I don't like it. But intellectually, I could understand that something is good, that something has a value, even though I don't like it. So what does that mean? My brain, my intelligence is the tool for me to escape the self. I could connect to things that are the opposite of me. Let's go back to emotion for a minute, because we want to contrast the two. Emotion is how I relate to the world outside of me, but in emotion, I am subjective. What does subjective mean? Emotion is how does that make me feel? So I am the center. When you come to intelligence, how I feel doesn't matter. 2 + 2 is 4. It's irrelevant how I feel. But in the world of emotion, I am very important. I love chocolate. I am very important. Right? It's not about is chocolate intellectually and objectively good. That's an intellectual question. In the world of emotion, chocolate is important because of how it relates to me. But I am the center. I am subjective. If you want a metaphor, in the metaphor of the Kabbalah, emotion is like a tree. It can grow, it can develop, it's big, it's wonderful, but it's planted in one place. Ultimately, it can't escape the self. Ultimately, emotion is rooted in self. Subjectivity is rooted in self. So I can grow, I can expand. I'm much more than a stone. Stone is just action, because it could just be action without emotion, no life. I could just do something without life. I can give you something, but I don't really love you. It's just action without life. But then there's emotion. Emotion is beautiful. The trees, there are trees that are 2,000 years old, much taller than human beings. They're beautiful, but they're rooted in self. They can't expand. They can't move away from self. According to the Kabbalah, the animal is the metaphor for the intelligence, because the intelligence could roam. The animal is not locked in one place. The animal could travel. It's not locked in one place. It's not rooted in myself. So in other words, if I want to speak simply, if I live in the third world, in the world of Bria, the world of creation, the question of how I feel is irrelevant. It's about God. It's not about me. I mean, I exist. I'm somebody, but I'm somebody who's thinking. Thinking is, I want to know the truth. I want to know, is 2 + 2, is it 4? Okay? It's not about me. So I exist, but I'm not focused on self. If I lower myself to the third world, second from bottom, third from top, to the world of formation, here, remember I told you that the ego, the self-centeredness is much more powerful in the third world. That's the world of emotion. So here in emotion, I am very important, and it's all about me. And that's okay, that's healthy, that's what emotion is. But on the other hand, God also gifted us with intelligence to understand that you can go beyond yourself occasionally, right? Let's say there's a conflict and I feel very different than you. In the world of emotion, we're going to be at conflict. In the world of intelligence, we can make peace.
But can emotion trigger intellect?
Okay, yes, emotion could. Emotion could motivate you to think, but then world number 2, in other words, the world of formation is elevating you to the world of creation. It's a question of what state of mind you're in. Remember, you have 4 dimensions within self that correspond to the 4 worlds, which we'll get to. We only explained 3 out of the 4, but we got 4 levels within the soul because there are 4 levels within the world. And if I want to know what world am I in, the question is what part of myself am I operating under? And this is a big problem. Sometimes you have a conversation between 2 people and the conversation explodes. Why? Because one person is talking intellectually and one person is talking emotionally. So they're never going to get along. Well, we have to make sure when you communicate, are we on the same page? If the person you're talking to is feeling very emotional, either pain or love or whatever, or hurt or trauma, and you try to speak to them and try to rationalize it, they're going to just feel that you're not connecting because you're in a different world. You're not even in the same universe. You're in the world of creation. They're in the world of formation. You're in the world of ideas, and they don't care about ideas. They care about, I'm hurt, I'm in pain, or I'm in love. And that's okay. It's not that one world is better than the next. You need all 4, right? You need the world of action too. Some people have wonderful ideas, but they can't get out of bed and do it, because they don't have the world of action, right? The point here is that within the human soul, we also move between all 4 worlds, because to operate, we have to operate in multiple levels. And we have all 4 of those levels within ourselves, because again, we're reflecting the 4 levels within the spiritual worlds. And the point is, the more cognizant I am of what world I'm in, the more balanced I am, because the more I understand, am I in the right world? Am I communicating? Am I operating in the right world? Or maybe right now I have to move to a different world to interact with the person I'm sitting next to. Finally, so again, lowest world is action, the ability of a person to do something, which really is not spiritual. In other words, it has no emotion, it has no life, because action could have life, but action could also not have life. Emotion is more spiritual. There's feeling, there's emotion, there's life, but emotion ultimately is like a tree. It's about how do I feel? It's subjective, and it's rooted in the center. It's rooted in the self, because how does it make me feel is the only question that emotion wants to answer. And then you get to the point of intelligence, which is really more spiritual. It's the world of creation. It's the highest of the created worlds, because with your intelligence, it's less about you. With your intelligence, it's less about you. With intelligence, it's about objectivity. I could now understand something even if I don't agree with it. Even if I don't agree with it emotionally, I can understand that this was the right thing to do, even though for me, it didn't turn out to be that well. I can understand that broccoli is good, even though my taste buds react negatively to it, right? So that's freedom, because freedom means transcendent. I'm transcending myself. And finally, we get to the highest world. And the highest world within the person is the ability, we call it medaber, speech, but I don't want to get into the details. The point here is the ability of a person to lose all sense of self and connect to somebody else in a very deep way. So if I'm in a relationship, and now sometimes it's about how do I feel? How do I understand? But if I could move to the point where I am now thinking about you, it's not about me, it's about you, and I feel and I empathize with you, then in some sense, I'm in the highest world. Because the highest world, remember we said, is purity. It's not about me. I don't feel myself. I am selfless. That's the highest, and that's the most spiritual world. And that's the ability of the human being to really transcend the self and connect to somebody else in a very deep way. And these are the 4 steps within the self. And now, in the remaining 5 minutes, what I'm going to try to do is pull up a verse from Genesis and show that in how we relate to other people, we also could go through any of these 4 worlds. And if I'm relating to other people and I have some degree of conflict, it may be because either we're not in the same world, we're not communicating on the same world. So it's like 2 people that are trying to speak to each other through radio, but they're not on the same channel. They're not going to understand it. They're not speaking the same language, so they're not going to understand each other. So you want to first figure out what language am I using, and then you want to figure out what world am I in, and what world is the person I'm talking to, what world are they in? And that's going to be that, and that maybe is maybe the most practical side of this. But we'll do that, and we should be done in 2-3 minutes. Not too much time left. Okay, so I'm going to show you the verse here. You still have a couple minutes? Okay.
Sure.
You're not tired? Okay, so this is the world about this is okay, I'm looking at page 13.
Same page in this
13,
one?
1-3, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
11. Okay.
Okay, we're going to try to do this. We're going to try to get it in and out as quick as we can. In other words, try to do this, to do it in short. Be short, sweet, and to the point. And the bottom line is this: before we even read the verse, in a relationship, there's there's 4 ways a person can be in a relationship. Generally speaking, corresponding to the 4 worlds. The first one is the world of action. The world of action means there's no emotional connection, there's no intellectual connection, and there is no feeling connected to the highest world. There's certainly no transcendence. Let's start with the 3. I'm in the world of action. I'm totally physical. I'm totally into myself. I'm like a stone. I'm not expanding. I'm into myself. I'm just myself. Now, when I say myself, it could mean I'm alone. It could also mean I'm in a relationship, but I feel alone, right? I don't feel connected to that person. There's no feeling. If there's no feeling, I'm in the world of action. I may hold the door for you. I may pass you the breakfast, but that's the world of action, and there's no emotional connection. If there's no emotional connection, we are alone. Now, alone, like I said, alone could be in a state of I'm physically alone. It could also be I'm living in the same house as you. We're under the same roof. We're talking to each other, but we're alone. Each of us are alone because we're doing all the actions, but there's no emotion. Okay, that's the lowest world. Then you have emotional connection. And emotional connection is wonderful because I love you, you love me. It's wonderful. The problem with emotional connection, the reason not the problem, the limitation of emotional connection is that we're in a relationship. In emotion, again, emotion is subjective and it's about how do I feel? And you're about how do you feel? And eventually there's going to be some tension because eventually we are not necessarily going to feel the same way. So it's much more than being alone. It's much higher than being alone, right? Because now we're in the world of emotion. The world of emotion, it could be, you can have deep connection, but still there's going to be some degree, ultimately there'll be some degree of conflict. Because if I'm rooted in myself and you're rooted in yourself, which is, by the way, what is love? Love is ultimately, all love is, it comes back to self. I love what makes me feel good. I love you. What do you mean I love you? I love how you make me feel, if you think about it, right? The famous story that I say, one of my favorite stories is the guy goes into the fish restaurant and the waiter says, what do you want? He says, give me fish. I love fish. So the waiter says, you don't love fish. If you loved fish, the fish would still be swimming in the water. You love yourself. So therefore you eat fish because fish make you feel good, right? All I'm trying to say is nothing wrong with love. All I'm trying to say is you get to the second level of a relationship, which is very important. Emotion saves you from being alone. If I love you and you love me, we're no longer alone. That's wonderful. We went to the world of formation. We're more spiritual. And therefore this connection, which is wonderful. However, ultimately there could be conflict because I'm rooted in self, you're rooted in self. I'm subjective, you're subjective. There's going to be some degree of tension. When you get to that tension, you go up a world. What's the next world? Next world is when we're in this relationship and we connect, not just in a physical way, that's physically is the lowest world, not only emotionally, but also intellectually. In the world of intelligence, we could understand how we complement each other. And we can understand that even if in this decision right now, the way I feel and the way you feel don't line up, but intellectually we understand that this relationship is healthy for us and beneficial, and your perspective is okay. And even though I don't agree with it, but I respect it, that's the contribution of the world of intelligence. And then finally, you get to the highest world. The highest world is where you can get to a point in a connection where a person is totally committed to the other person. And in this matter, it doesn't really matter how I feel. I'm not concerned. I am concerned only for you. I'm dedicated to you. You're in pain. I want to connect to you. How you feel, how I feel is irrelevant in this moment. If I get to that feeling, I'm the most spiritual. I got to the part of myself which is able to transcend self. I'm no more self-centered. I'm spiritual. I can connect to somebody else. So in a relationship, you're going to have all four. You're going to have times that you feel alone and you're only connecting the world of action. You have times which you're doing both. You're connecting the world of action and you also feel emotionally connected, which is more spiritual. You have times even intellectually connected, which means even if emotionally I'm not feeling so, I'm not feeling that I'm being so, I'm getting exactly what I need because there's some tension, because my emotion is clashing with your emotion, because my subjectivity is clashing with your subjectivity, but there's an intellectual bond. And an intellectual bond goes beyond myself and it makes sense to me. And I see that I get some, you get some, we make compromise, that's intelligence. But it's still in the world of intelligence, there's still an existence which is me. Then you get to the point, the most spiritual point you get to is sometimes you see this in a moment where somebody is truly and completely concerned for the other. And they're not making a calculation win-win. Today I'll go what you want, tomorrow you'll go with what I want. That is already an intellectual calculation, which is okay, but it's a calculation. You want to get to the point where you could get to a point in a relationship that each party at certain times doesn't see themselves. It's all about the other. And if only one party does that, that's a problem. But ultimately in a healthy relationship, both parties at some point will make the other person feel, and it will really be that way, that it's not about me, it's about you, it's about the other person. Now, let me just read a verse, okay? This is a verse that God tells, that motivates God to create a relationship between Adam and Eve, to create Eve. So the verse reads as follows. Verse 18 on page 13. This is Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. 18. Hashem, God said, "It is not good that man be alone. I will make him a helper." Literally, here they say corresponding to him, but it means opposite him. A helper, ezer kinegdo, a helper opposite him. All kinds of ways of reading this verse. I'm just reading this verse to show you the 4 steps. Are you ready? Here we go. It's not good for man to be alone. The lowest level is when we're alone. In the world of action, we're alone. We're living in the same house. I'm handing you the breakfast. We're alone. We're not emotionally connected. Then the next level alluded to in this verse is God says, you know what? We're going to make a helper, a helper opposite. Opposite is the world of emotion. We're connected. We're sitting across the table. We have a relationship. I'm drawn to you. You're drawn to me. It's wonderful. But ultimately, there's a feeling of oppositeness. There could be some tension because, again, I am rooted in my subjectivity. You're rooted in your subjectivity. And therefore, there's going to be some tension. Then you get to the point of ezer, help. Help is when you climb to the 3rd level, the spiritual level, where we help each other, meaning to say, I understand intellectually that this relationship is good for me, it's good for you. Sometimes I compromise, sometimes you compromise. It's an intellectual understanding that we can have some balance here, and I can go beyond the limitations of emotion. And even when the emotion is feeling hurt, I intellectually understand that relationship makes sense. That's fine, that's good, that's intellectual connection, and that's healthy. But then finally, the highest level would be, I will make a help, as the verse reads, to him, Eseloi, I'm going to make a helper corresponding to him. If you could be a relationship and you could feel connected to the other, it's about the other, it's not about self. You know that you climbed to the world of Atzilut, you climbed to the highest world, and you escaped your subjectivity, your limitation, and you could connect to the other, you're in the highest world. So too, when you connect to God, with God, you also have these 4 levels, how I connect to God in prayer, but that's already beyond the scope because we're running out of time. So in order to summarize, because we said a lot of names and a lot of things, I just want to summarize. I'm going to make 3 short points. Number 1, Kabbalistic notion of reality. We have 4 worlds. We start out the oneness of God, the world of emanation. It's just God expressing himself in 10 ways. We go to the world of creation, where there is a separate entity, a distinct entity that is not God. But that entity is intellectual, meaning that entity is not focused on self. That entity is focused on understanding God or connecting to God or connecting to what's good in the world. Then you go to the next world. If you're in a lower world, the world of formation, that world is about emotion. What does emotion mean? There's an existence, there's an ego, there's a sense of self, and that the creations of that spiritual state are very interested in how do we feel, very interested in, that's what the world of emotion is. How does this make me feel? It's all about me, which is fine, but that's the third world. And then you get to the lowest world where there's no emotion at all. In other words, it's primarily physical. Yes, we have all four because each one includes all, but primarily, if you want to define this physical world, it's physical. Physical means action. So the way God creates the worlds, we have all four spiritual worlds. By the way, without getting too detailed, that's why the letter of Hashem, the name of Hashem, Yud Kei Vav Kei, has 4 letters. Each letter corresponds to one of those 4 worlds, right? So this idea is rooted in every aspect of the Kabbalah. Okay, what does that mean within myself? Within myself, I also have those 4 worlds. We'll start from the bottom and go up. I have my ability to take an action. That's the most physical side of self. To do anything, to eat breakfast, to eat lunch, to go somewhere. That's all action. It's the lowest side of self. Then I go up a level. My ability to feel an emotion. That's more spiritual, but it's still rooted in self. Like Seth said, it's not objective. Then I get to the world of understanding. My mind could take me anywhere. It can take me beyond my own experience. It could actually help. I could actually understand that my emotional reaction is wrong. Right? It lets me go beyond myself. That's more spiritual. And finally, I get to the highest world, the essence of my soul, which allows me to connect to the other person on their terms. It's not about me, it's about you. If I can get to that level, I'm in the highest world where I don't exist. I'm not created. I'm just pure, right? It's the sense of self has not been created. I can go beyond that. It's the world of Atzilut. And then if I want to apply this notion to relationships, it's the same idea. I can be in a relationship with you because I did something for you. It's the lowest level. I bought you flowers for Shabbos. Okay, that's the lowest level. Then, in addition to buying you flowers for Shabbos, I also have a feeling. I love you. Okay, that's second level. Then the problem with love is ultimately, if my relationship is just about emotion, guarantee 100% of the time, you're eventually going to feel some tension because my emotion and your emotion are both rooted in self. There's going to be conflict, which is fine. Conflict, it's fine. Just go to the therapist. The bottom line is there's going to be some conflict. That's connectoid. There's opposite. There'll be conflict. If I introduce another dimension of the relationship, it's not just I love you, but I actually understand that this bond is very important because you give to me and I give to you, and I feel that it's sort of like a win-win situation here. What is that? That's an intellectual connection, and that's Azer. That's a help. So it's a wonderful step up. It's a wonderful upgrade, but that too is about a calculation. I'm here because of what I get. It's an intellectual calculation. And then you get to the point where I'm here for you. And sometimes you can feel that. And when I feel that, I'm escaping the feeling of self. That's when in the relationship, I'm the most spiritual. Hopefully, the other person feels the same to you occasionally. Otherwise, it's just a one-way street, and that's not a healthy relationship, right? You have dysfunctional relationships where one person does not feel themselves ever, and the other one always feels themselves. Then you need serious help.
What if you're stuck in that one level?
So
And
you have to
maybe-
find within yourself, before you figure out the other person, I have to also be able to move within myself. Sometimes, let's say I wake up in the morning and I don't feel love this morning, okay? There's a few ways you can react. Staying stuck in the emotion is not gonna solve it. You have to move. If this track is not working, move tracks. Now, you can move up or you can move down. One way to move down, and you alluded to it before, I could say, you know what, my emotion is not important. Let's connect on the level of action. Let's take a walk. I don't love you. Big deal. We'll take a walk. That could create the bond. And that could be opening up for the love to flow, right? But if there's a problem right now, if we're not connecting on this world, let's connect on a different world. We could connect in the world of action, or we can go up. Find a place within yourself intellectually which understands that even though right now, excuse my language, you are annoying me, but intellectually I understand that this relationship is actually good and healthy because of I give you and you give me. So then I'm moving within myself. I'm quieting down, not focusing on my emotional reaction. I'm trying to go into the world of intelligence within myself. And if that doesn't work, sometimes devotion. So I'm not happy. For this moment, for this day, I'm going to be devoted to you. I'm going to the highest world. So I cannot be locked. I have to understand that my personality is multifaceted. I have at least 4 dimensions. Each one has details, but I have 4 dimensions. If I'm sensing trouble in one of them, that's okay. I can move to another one, and the other one will straighten out over time. And then I have to figure out, that's within myself. Then if I'm sitting with you and I feel like you're feeling something and you want to connect on this level, I cannot connect on a different level. Because if that would be frustrating to you. So for example, if you come to me and you have an emotional problem, and I do what all men do, we try to provide a practical answer. What's the problem? Why is this the most frustrating things in relationship where the woman wants empathy and the man wants to give a solution? Because the woman wants to connect in the world of emotion. Man is connecting in the world of action. You have a problem, I'll solve your action. But the woman doesn't want the action. I'm just using an example. You see, it could be male, female, it doesn't matter. Or sometimes I want to connect in the level of ideas, and you're not interested in ideas at this moment, or vice versa. So this, first of all, within myself, I have to be ready to move, but also I have to be cognizant of what the other person is feeling. And if the other person is at one step, I have to be there. Like, let's say, imagine there's a 4-story building, and you're on the 2nd story, and I'm on the 1st story. It's not going to work. Right? If I want to communicate with you at this moment, I have to put myself in, speak your language. And I have to go to your world. And if you're on
But
level 4.
doesn't the other person also
yes,
have a responsibility?
Yes. And the other person also has to take the class and also has to understand. But sometimes when someone is in pain, for example, you can't expect them to move as quick as the person who's not in pain.
It's not the other person's responsibility to move with us.
Well,
It's only our responsibility to be with them. We can't expect them to do anything.
I agree with your second half of the statement, but not with the first half of your statement. In other words,
Okay.
yes, at any given moment, I cannot control the other person. I can control myself. But overall, in a relationship, over time, both parties.
Okay, maybe over time, that's okay.
Over time, but if one person is always compromising and always understanding, and the other person is just totally always into self, that's not healthy. But yes, at any given moment, there's one person, usually one person is more flexible and one person is less flexible for a variety of reasons. And if you see, some people by definition are more emotional. And if you're more emotional by definition, but based on what we're saying here, you're going to be a little bit more flexible, less flexible, because emotion is rooted in self. Now, I fell in love with you because you're an emotional person. And then I get upset that you're emotional and you're not intellectual. You're not able to forget about how you feel. No, that's who you are. Right? So the point of the matter is that at any given time, one person will be less flexible than the other, and the other person should move. But the point here is, over time, both parties have to move, because we are a multifaceted person. Don't make no mistake. Because I see you, there's multiple yous, and every time I interact with you, it could be a different you. And not only is it different you, it's a different me. Sometimes I'm speaking emotionally, sometimes I'm speaking practically, sometimes I'm speaking in a level of devotion. And I'm not important here, you're important here. I'm moving and you're moving. Now you understand why relationships and why communication is so hard. Because I first have to understand where I am, and then I have to understand where you are. And then I have to figure out, can I move or can you move? But the bottom line is, we're not going to solve every communication problem through this class. But the bottom line is, now we have a roadmap. Now we understand what's happening within myself and within the other person. Now I understand. Now I know the mechanics of my soul and of your soul. Now, hopefully, I'll have the tools to either shift myself and help you understand, not shift you, but help you understand what you're feeling. That's also good. If you could help someone see that they are right now in the world of action, or they are right now in the world of emotion, which is fine. It's not a critique. But if you can help someone understand this, that will be helpful as well. Okay, this is a lot. Okay, we went over time, which is the number one thing I try not to do. So right now the class is over. Whoever wants to go can go. Whoever wants to stay and schmooze can stay and schmooze. But thank you so much for joining. This has been a lot of fun for me. I appreciate it. We're going to do one more class in this series, lesson number 4, which is going to be next week, Tuesday, God willing. If you want a recording of any of the other ones, you can reach out to me, or you could just find me on YouTube, or you can reach out to me and I'll send you a recording of the other classes. This has been fun, so I appreciate it. And thank you, John, for joining in person. And thank you to Varleya for helping me, because Varleya is here. And thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
So what are you going to do today? Don't know?